This is section 9.3. This is part 3. We want to solve this quadratic equation with using the quadratic formula. Now, in order to use the quadratic formula, we need a 0. And we also said that it's easiest if our first term is positive. Now, I could create a 0 by moving both of these over to the left, or I can create a 0 by moving this one over to the right. If I move this one over to the right, I'll be adding x squared to both sides, which is going to give me a positive number first. So I get 0 equals x squared minus 5x plus 20, which of course is the same thing as x squared minus 5x plus 20 equal to 0. So this means that our a is 1, our b is negative 5, and our c is 20. So let's look at our formula. X equals negative b. The opposite of b, that's a negative 5, so I write down a positive 5. Plus or minus the square root of b squared, negative 5 in parentheses, squared, minus 4 times a times c. 4 times a is 1, times c, which is 20. And this is all over 2 times a. Okay, so simplifying inside here, I have 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 in parentheses squared is 25, minus 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 20 would be 80, and this is over 2. Okay, well, this is 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 80 is negative 55, and this is over 2. Well, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. Every time you do that, you get an error, and we say that it is not a real number. Okay, so right here, that's a problem. So since we would end up having to take the square root of a negative number to find the answer to this, what we say is that there are no real number solutions. Okay? Now I'm going to step back a little bit. At the very beginning, I said that the part under the square root is really important, and it is called the discriminant. And this is the b squared minus 4ac part. And it can tell us a whole lot about what we can expect our answers to be. Okay? If b squared minus 4ac equals 0, then we get a single rational solution. Now, in this case, when we talk about rational, we're talking about things that a decimal that ends, a square root that's going to be exact. We're not going to end up with a square root in it that we cannot simplify any further. The first problem we worked was an example of this. Underneath the radical, the discriminant was 0. When we solved this, we got 2. We got one answer. There's no square root still involved, so it's a single rational solution. Okay? If b squared minus 4ac is a negative number, so if it's less than 0, we have no real number solutions. That's precisely what we had on this example. Our discriminant was negative 55. We can't do that, so we don't get any answers. Okay, now if b squared minus 4ac equals a perfect square, then we get 2 rational solutions. Okay, now let's look at this. This problem right here. The discriminant was 36. 36 is a perfect square. So when we did all this, we got 2 solutions, and neither of these has a radical still stuck inside, so I got 2 rational solutions. And then the last possibility is if b squared minus 4ac equals a positive number that is not a perfect square. Okay, so if we have that, then we get 2 irrational solutions. Example of that was right here. Our discriminant was 21. That's not a perfect square, but it is a positive number. And we ended up with 2 answers that are irrational because they still have a square root in them. So just by doing the discriminant, just by looking at that, we can tell what kind of answer to expect. And this doesn't take a whole lot of thought. It's just something to keep in mind. You have to figure out the discriminant to do these anyway. Okay, so let's keep going in the next video.